Today on Conversations Aloud, we're discussing what makes human life meaningful when AI takes over work that used to give us purpose. We're joined by Avi Mederer, who is a software engineer, a ChatGPT coach, and a data analyst. He also has an upcoming book, The Future of Purpose: Finding Meaning Beyond Work in an AI World. Welcome to the show, Avi.
Okay, thank you very much, Hadi. It's nice to meet you, and thank you for your time and for what I'm looking forward to a great interview.
Same over here. Thanks for joining. So, first of all, Abby, what drew you to explore the intersection of AI and human purpose?
Well, to be very specific, I've given that some thought, and people have asked me that question. And honestly, it was a marketing evolution for myself. Basically, I used to be involved in event production, venture capital world, investments, things like that, and also in tourism. COVID hit, and I needed to get back to something that was less risky and less people to people. I used to be a software quality assurance engineer. Then because of COVID, went back into tech, back into coding. So I studied data analysis, some more coding, updated myself in Python, etc., and then started to get into large language models and deep learning, etc. And it became very, very quickly obvious to me that this world that we're in of AI was moving so quickly that from a marketing point of view, I needed to be able to sell something. And I realized there's thousands of coaches out there. And, the truth is that AI and GPT are so easy to use that once you jump in, it's easier than sending an email. All you have to do is ask it how to work with it, and it works with you. So that evolved. And then I started realizing that there are these sociological civilization questions that aren't really being talked about. And those are, well, how do people make a living if so many things are being automated? What gives people the reason to wake up to in the morning if a lot of people found their purpose in the work that they do, whether it's a doctor or a lawyer or a waiter at a restaurant, right? If the robots are delivering food and the way the robot's doing it for you, then how do you have that human experience in the world that we live in? So that was the beginning of it, and then got deeper and deeper into it and realized that there's a lot of people talking about, again, ramifications, whether it's economically, sociologically, educationally, but there aren't that many people talking about what is it that keeps us human. And the point that I got to realize that there's a need for this is when I was speaking with some friends of mine. One of them is a nurse practitioner in the field of oncology, and she was saying the human aspect, the human to human connection, is what AI is not going to be able to take away from us. And so that kind of combination of the humanity, the relationships, human to human relationships, as well as finding purpose, finding meaning. A lot of people have read Viktor Frankl and finding, man's search for meaning, and those kinds of content. And logotherapy is what he was involved in. So that's how I got into it.
Yeah, interesting. And to your point, work has traditionally given people their identity, their status, their purpose, structure, even. So if AI takes over, large parts of that, where do you feel meaning comes from?
An excellent question. So meaning comes from the value that we provide to others is one way to see it. Meaning, again, those human to human connections. It can also be within ourselves in bringing beauty to the world, making ourselves finding our contribution to society and humanity, and that's the place that it can come to. And it doesn't have to be, on grand scales of, some huge invention where we've solved the world's problems. It can be, a young parent that is, bringing up little children and bringing them to be good citizens of the world. And all that is changing, of course. What does that mean to be the world? Right? It used to be some kind of way of giving contribution, but there's a lot of opportunity. We have the leading edge of the baby boom. I mean, a lot of older people are coming into the need for more care, more personal interaction with them. And then at the lower end, the younger end, people my age, early 60s, that stage as well. And a lot of the AI is, for example, going to replace or at least augment and supply low cost interaction with humans. with the older people or with other people in general, or just in general society. But there are still opportunities for us as humans, again, to find that meaning. And everybody has really their own niche that can be and should be explored. Because when you don't have a reason to wake up to, be a radiologist, for example, or the waiter that I was talking about, right? So then, what do you do during the day? And there's a lot of contribution that can be done in the world, whether it's working with, in social frameworks, can be working in areas of Big Brother, Big Sister, that kind of thing. Mm, Re-examining what it means to be as a partner or a member of a partnership within a family structure or whatever that structure is, right? All those opportunities there now because we can either allow AI to allow us to become so much more productive and nonstop, or we can learn from the last 20 years of technology where we thought it would make life slower, sped up life, and got us to do more and more and more. Now let's take a step back and reconnect with the people around us.
Awesome. So what I'm hearing a lot is human connection. That's where
Yes.
a lot of the value is going to come from, and that's kind of going back to thousands of years. That's where a lot of our value all our value now comes from work. That's a new, I think, concept. But a lot of it used to come from human connection, and it's looking like we're going to go back to that. When I think about the future, I feel like there's going to be a lot in healthcare, but AI can do a lot of that stuff. And what's left is when people have more free time, as you said, it's connection, it's connectivity, whether that's meeting new people in new environments or kind of being with the family. The excuse of being a lousy father is going to be difficult to come by now because you've got
Right.
time.
Don't, you don't have to stay late at the office anymore, especially working remotely. But
Yeah.
there can be meaning in other ways as well. It can be, the solo individual that is just, I come from a camping and canoeing background, originally from Canada. And, there's this ethic of leaving the campsite cleaner than it was when you got there. So how do we as individuals, even doesn't necessarily have to be person to person, how do we as individuals leave the world a better place than it was when we arrived? Right. So it can still be um, situations where, we're contributing to the environment or we're inventing or we're even, it doesn't even have to be human to human. It can be human to animal situations. It can be
Human to planet.
climate, right? It's just the planet in general, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's difficult because we live in a culture of more, 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 and power is for a lot of people important. It just feels like AI could lead us to that path where there's going to be a greater concentration of power and ability to really kind of control society because data can be analyzed really quickly. And so to me, when I think about the future, I think there's going to be, it's downhill for a bit while we go through that period of just a lot of power being concentrated, a lot of data being analyzed. And then once we are able to understand it better and overcome that hurdle, there's this utopia future whereby we have more free time. We're able to be with nature. We're able to focus on, as you said, leaving the world in a better place. Because those things like power and money isn't as important as it might be right now. Is that what you see too?
It's definitely, and just to highlight one of the things that very specifically is there's going to be what people are saying, right? I'm not a prophet, but from what the discussions are, is that there's going to be this transition period of it's going to be a tough period, and that tough period could start in the next year or two or three, and then afterwards it'll be a much better situation, whether that's 5 years out or 10 years out, what have you. The difference now and earlier industrial revolutions is that it's moving much faster. One, so when you had the transition from horses to cars, or from telegraph to telephone, or even from uh, you know manual paper ledger sheets to spreadsheets, we still had a decade or two to transition, and those changes were in specific industries. Here, it's across everything.
Right.
Everything is being affected by AI, right? And everything is affected by automation and by the ability to process information that much faster. So that's one of the difference. Another difference is that it's not really, and I came to realize this, it's not really an industrial revolution we're facing. It's a societal revolution. It's much closer probably to the Enlightenment, where
Mm.
people, or the printing press even, where people gained access and were allowed to during the Enlightenment, certainly, or took upon themselves the power, to use the term that you were talking about, to question authority. Right? And that's how broad this change is. Now, as far as the power is concerned, what is being forecasted is that AI itself, as the main engines, whether it's ChatGPT or Anthropic or Grok and Elon Musk's platform, etc. If those platforms are going to be like the transistor, it's going to be in everything we use. And yes, the people that are running those things are going to have super wealth from those technologies that they've developed. But the opportunities for using those, just putting on the sort of startup hat for a moment, are going to be all the people that implement their technology. That's on the one hand. On the societal level, because the world, government, society, and civilization has to address how do people make a living, right? So people are talking about a global basic income or universal basic income, where people will be given a stipend of sort, or an allowance, right? So the radiologist is making, I don't know, $100,000 or whatever they're making a year, right? In the United States, they're not going to be given $100,000 because they used to be a radiologist and they're out of work. They're going to be given 20, 30, $50,000, whatever it is, enough to make a living in their household, right? And then there's going to be this concept that I don't know if it's going to happen that way, but one of the things that they're talking about is that it's going to be contribution based, meaning, okay, you get your minimum wage per se, and then you get a certain amount of points. So if you've contributed to society in some way, whether it's elder care, whether it's environment, whether it's some new invention, whatever it is, and you get extra points and extra income. You still have to contribute somehow. That's one level of it. Even the entrepreneurs, the investors, the founders, like the people from ChatGPT and Claude and Anthropic and Grok, etc., they are talking about how they're going to be taxed in order to pay for that universal basic income.
Mm.
So even though they don't like it, right, but they realize that it has to come from somewhere, because otherwise the economy doesn't run without some kind of source of income. And the government can't just print money, because then we get into inflation and all kinds of economic problems. So it's people are not that worried about unless you get into dystopian problems of, the AI takes over. That's a different situation, right? But if you get into a healthy change, but a healthy society, then the power is really distributed and it's managed across society in that way.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think what worries me with the contribution bit you mentioned there. I mean, ideally,
Mm.
it's great because what happens is that you have a minimum income that allows you
Yeah,
to live, and then anything above that is based on your contribution. But then, who dictates what is a good contribution and a bad contribution? I mean, we have this kind of system in China, right, where
yeah,
they it's a crazy
yeah,
system where you're given credit points on whether you say the right thing or you I don't know what are the factors, but this system, this point system, allows you to whether you can go to school, a good school for your children, whether you can use the train, whether you have access to all these services and facilities, so they can actually cut you out based on what they perceive as good or bad, and that's the one of the powers given to government that I think a lot of people are scared about, because
right,
if we don't have a source of income and we're relying on the government for everything from that
right.
universal basic income, they get to dictate what is good and bad. That is a complex and possibly dangerous situation.
Absolutely. And just anecdotally, by the way, the situation in China, what's being reported is also you have to be careful which phone calls you answer or not. Because if you answer the
Phone calls.
phone, if you answer the phone call from someone who is of lesser import than you
Oh,
lose points, right? That's
oh wow.
also,
Okay.
part of the craziness. In any case, you're right. And the question is who decides, right? And I don't have a specific answer. I do know that a lot of the thought leaders today are talking about one of the biggest things that needs to be put in place immediately, and unfortunately not, from what we see, is people running on platforms of this is how we're going to deal with this situation, AI specifically, meaning with regard to AI, right? So in upcoming elections, I don't know the specific election cycle in England, But in the United States, so you have presidential elections coming up. So 2029 is the next presidential
2029.
election. You
Yeah.
have midterms in 2028, right? Or 2027, et cetera. So the problem is that nobody's running on those platforms. We don't hear any politicians coming in gearing up towards that. Yes, government in general, the federal government in the United States has an AI mandate now, but nobody's coming in and talking about this is how we need to address society, right? It's still very much about the technology and the investment and the infrastructure and the data centers and electricity and energy, et cetera. But nobody's talking about society yet. People are talking about it, but it really needs to start happening now where the politicians have to start running on those platforms of how we're going to address that. Who gets to decide? If that's even the structure, right? It might not be a UBI kind of situation, but whatever the structure is, there is no doubt that there's going to be huge job displacement and issues of human purpose and society, and that at the same time with the baby boom and an aging population, and so all those things need to be addressed in an AI framework as well.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Do you know the TV series Black Mirror? It's Black Mirror is this English TV series where they show dystopian scenes. Every episode is different. It's not connected. But if people haven't seen it, there's an episode, I forgot the name of it, but it's specifically about this credit score system and what it does to society. Very interesting how everything, every interaction becomes so important and you want to be part of the elite. And there's actually coaches that help you, go up the credit score system
The
so you
scale,
can,
right?
mingle with the right people and have access to the services that allow you with that system. Very interesting stuff. But we often hear that humans, as to your point, are more than just economic units. What defines humans, human uniqueness, let's say, when AI is stronger in muscles and intelligence?
So I'm listening now to a book by John Lennox. It's a book called 2084. He borrowed it from the idea of 1984.
All right.
And he has an updated version now of 2084 in an AI world. If you look at it, it's like a white cover, and it's 2084. Original one was black cover with letters and numbers 2084. Now it's with in AI. And he quotes someone that AI has the wrong name. It's not artificial intelligence. It's artificial information processing, right? It's not really an intelligence. And the human, which is different than every other biological being in the world, has the capacity to think, to create, to regenerate, to recognize nuance, not algorithmically, like artificial intelligence, getting back to the traditional way that we use it, right? But rather by deep intuitive thought and by the energy that exists within ourselves and within the group, whether the group is 2 people or more people, right? We know, for example, that there are 3 different brain centers in the body. There's our main brain, right, which does all the calculation and left and right brain and creative and logical, etc., logical. And then there's the neurocenter within the heart, which gives us those the emotions and our feelings. And then in our abdomen, which gives us that gut feeling, right? And those 3 areas are what really make up the human and the human ability to sense danger, not algorithmically, but realistically, the ability to connect one to another, right? Humans don't act on instinct. Sometimes we do. We have fight or flight, right? But we're not acting like by instinct like animals do in the animal kingdom, right? Where they sense danger and they leave, or they know what to search or to chase after for their sustenance, right? Humans have a much broader intelligence, literally, that allows us to change our environment. And that's what makes us human. And AI can, by the impetus of the human, change environment, right? But it's all algorithms, basically.
It's all algorithms, yes. And some people argue that feelings are just zeros and ones that one day we'll able to kind of understand and recreate in a robot or something, whereby they would know what that feeling means because it's kind of coded in these zeros and ones. So it's interesting, but it's all again based on data, which is similar to what I think for a lot of humans, we base a lot of our world on data that we've experienced from, from when we were born to today. We're kind of being fed this information, which we have a system within us that allow us to automatically put things into categories and whether that something's dangerous or not, which kind of creates this automatic feeling or intuition or gut feeling on whether to move forward or backwards. Isn't that also based on data you feel, or is it something else?
Well, how does a new parent, say a mother, right? How does the mother have that nurturing feeling towards their child?
It's true.
It's not
Now that you
data.
say that,
It's
hmm,
not like a logical thing where the mother says, "Oh, there's a difference between a mother's care of a newborn and a human's care for a stray animal," right? Because there's that emotional, personal
hmm,
connection, right? And it can be an adopted child as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be one that was carried to birth, etc. But that's the difference. And yes, we do internalize, I guess, an instinctual reaction to events in our lives by experience. But we're also able to extrapolate from those in new situations. We can also experience empathy towards others, right? We can feel sympathy towards others. We can learn to care for others in a non-technical, logistical way. Is the way that machines work, but humans don't work that way. Humans connect. We feel the energy between, unless someone is a sociopath, unfortunately, right, and just doesn't have those emotional capabilities. But if someone, thankfully, is healthy, relatively healthy in any case, they're going to have that human connection. They're not going to be working on only the logical algorithmic method in an automated way.
yeah, yeah. No, that's interesting. I mean, it's interesting how when you become a father or mother, there are those instincts where you're not really taught, you're not taught them, but you just know them, and you're able to respond and step up in a way where you never learned it, you never thought about it. It just comes
Right.
naturally to you. It's kind of like in your DNA, where you're able to know things and know how to respond. It's very interesting how that happens and how quickly that happens as you have a child.
Right.
It's like you change without you doing anything.
When driverless vehicles are being developed and they are being used already. So there are ethical situations, where you have, an old person crossing the street and you have a group of school children crossing the other street and you have to go one way or the other. And you don't have, the car has to make a choice, right?
Mm,
And the ethicists have to get in and say, okay, well, so, you have the one old person, so he was already lived their life, right? And they have the children crossing the street. Oh, well, what if that person is, the person who's going to cure cancer? Then it changes the story, right? So the algorithm will give will make the choice based on what the humans told it to make. But the algorithm or the AI or the automated vehicle is not going to feel the mission critical decision that it needs to make. It's not the ethicist that's sitting in the background. And that's where the human comes in. That's where our humanity comes in, which is different, right? That's not something that we learn through experience. I mean, we do, and we learn, and we learn and we study philosophers and religion and et cetera to make those kinds of decisions. But we're not operating on that plane of just ones and zeros of saying, this is the logic, so this is what I'm going to do.
yeah, yeah. And then you could argue, of course, that there's the plane of material plane, but then there's something for a lot of people. There's something beyond just the material plane. There is the energy plane, which or whatever you want to call it, which the robots will not have or AI will not have, and that cannot be replicated in anything. So do you feel that the government you mentioned there about government, do you feel like they will have to provide a universal basic income? They will have to tax those ultra rich individuals who are making a lot of money from that, to provide that basic income and regulate this industry. Do you feel that they should be heavily involved, or should they let kind of the market work it out?
So the first of all, nobody really knows if that's the end result of there being universal basic income. maybe the transition is going to be a lot slower, and there will be time to evolve, and there will be time for the new jobs that are created through the implementation of AI throughout society and industry. So it might not be
Just
needed.
just on that, do you feel like, every technology does bring a lot of new jobs. They remove some jobs and they bring new jobs. Do you feel like this technology is a bit different in that it 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 seems like now one person can do a job of 30, 40 people.
For
And so is there a situation where there wouldn't be mass job losses? Or do you feel like that's a definite thing? I mean, nothing's definite, but the most probable likely outcome.
The only answer I have to that is one a question that I was asked recently is, are companies letting people off, at scale? And the companies that I'm working with are really seeking more productivity as opposed to laying
Mm,
people off. That said, the question is, how much productivity do we need? Productivity is great. And if it's going to speed up, which it is, solutions to healthcare, medical issues, mint, large human problems, right? Even housing, right? Housing, we can now 3D print houses. Right? And a lot of that is enabled by AI as well. Speeding up productivity in those areas is great. Speeding up productivity on, how many, new gadgets you need on your smartphone is a question, right? How much more productivity? And so then at some point, yes, there will be most likely a lot of job displacement. There are already, depending on the industry, significantly higher numbers. I mean, it sounds like it's not a big jump. For example, 4% to 6% unemployment for recent graduates, but that's about a 30-40% increase, right? It sounds like it's
yeah.
only 2%, but it's 30 or 40% increase in unemployment there. There are industries where it's 20-25% of unemployment coming out. So most likely there will be from just those statistics and just logically from what's happening.
Just on that,
Sure.
I worked in the accountancy world as a graduate, and I used to remember a lot of the work that we did initially in the beginning was proofreading, creating a
Sure.
deck, all those things, which now AI can just do that immediately, straight away. And so, yeah, of course, a lot of those roles are just going to go away.
Oh,
Especially the
oh,
entry roles. Yep, I agree with you.
absolutely. And just my own example, and then just a societal point on that is, I used to write, something that would take me a week or a few weeks to write in code takes minutes.
Yeah,
Right? I just tell the AI, this is what I need. And then we go through a debugging process, etc. Right. But it's down to, a few hours of work instead of several weeks. One of the challenges with that, though, when you were doing your decks and and gaining your experience in accounting, you were gaining experience. So the people
yeah,
that have been working in those industries, let's say that industry for 10, 20, 30 years, have 10, 20, 30 years of experience. The people coming in who are just plugging things into AI, they might be able to, put in the right prompt to get a certain task done, but they don't have that 20, 30 years of experience. So when those older people with the experience start leaving out of out of the industry, right? There's nobody to replace them that has that hands-on deeper learning of experience. And that's a big issue. Something that I've been studying a lot recently is the issue of literacy, right? So I used to go along with the regular definition of literacy is knowing how to read or write, right? But it's a
mhm,
lot more than that. UNESCO some 10 years ago came out with a definition that basically talks about how you need to literacy means being able to apply what you know how to read and write. You know how to make a change in society in the world by virtue of the fact that you know how to read or write. Right. So it's not just a matter of being able to recognize letters and words and absorb information. And that's what AI in the simplest terms that people are using it is just gathering information. Give me a 2,000 word essay on the history of the industrial or of the printing press or whatever it was, right? But there's no hands-on, you know, uh, hands-on rubber meets the rubber meets the road kind of internalization of that experience, and that's a big issue coming up. So even universities, you went and you studied accountancy, and you gained all that knowledge, and then you had the opportunity to apply it. And now people don't even have the opportunity to apply it. And then the question is, do you really need 4 years of accountancy study to get up to par to what the companies need? And for entry level work, for accountancy or lawyering or other industries, those things are being automated away already, right? So while companies are not letting go of people, companies are not hiring or hiring much less. They might be hiring one person or two people instead of 10 or 20.
Yeah, yeah. And to your point, that ceiling for healthcare, for example, that ceiling of we've had enough productivity is very high up. We could always have more productivity in healthcare because we have, an aging society and we're overwhelmed with the demand for healthcare services. There's just not enough. So
And
we
we
could
and we
always
want
see
older
that.
people to be able, we want older people to be able to live a nice life,
Yeah,
right? Not
comfortable
people
life.
that, are with Alzheimer's and sitting in bed and needing care and et cetera, right?
Mm,
Well, longer life is nice, but it needs to be a nicer life.
100%. Yeah. So do you feel that if humans had that, universal basic income, which is not something that might happen, but we're assuming it might happen, and they had that human connection, and they were able to connect with family and friends and spend most of their time doing that, and possibly finding a project to contribute to, will they be happy? Will that provide happiness to them? I guess another question would be, in a way, will that force people to find projects that allow them to be happy, or form part of their happiness? Because a lot of times what we see is that people, when they get income, if there's no goal for them or there's no focus for them that pushes them to move forward in a particular direction, they kind of wander around and feel lost, and are find it very difficult to find that happiness. Do you feel like it will push people to find those projects, and is that enough for happiness?
So there's a financial number of happiness that studies have shown, for example, that once people are, obviously, above survival level, and by United States standards these days, if someone is making about $75,000 a year, then they reach their happiness threshold, if you will. And once people are making more than that, they're not necessarily happier. Right. So, someone can be making 200, 300, $1 million a year. They're not necessarily happier. So happiness is really a humanly decided factor or feeling within themselves. So as far as what to do and how to spend one's time and how to find that I guess meaningful way to spend the time, I think that we're at an opportunity now where we could leverage a lot of the Western world has come to recognize that there's an ability for industry and society to retrain people, but in a good way. So there was a big movement, for good or for bad, I'm not going to get into it, but DEI, they had diversity and equity and inclusion, right? And there was a lot of movement towards that. And a lot of companies picked up the ball right away and started working on that. That those mechanisms through their HR department and wherever that was implemented, those mechanisms can be used now for kind of a retraining for people. And say, okay, we have this situation coming up. One possibility is, for example, we're going to go down from from 100 years ago and unions and labor rights from the 5-day work week to a 3-day work week, and even skip the 4-day work week, right? With AI, let's
Mm.
go to a 3-day work week. So now you have this huge amount of extra time. So now perhaps there's a responsibility within corporations and society in general, or the opportunity, not necessarily even as a responsibility, but perhaps the mechanism can be implemented through organizations to retrain people to find happiness. How do you have your search for happiness, and how do you find it, and how do you identify it? And everybody, in their own way, is going to find that reason for being, and that's what will bring the happiness, provided, of
Yeah.
course, that people can make a living, whatever that means, at whatever level.
Yeah, yeah. So there needs to be kind of a process that allows them to identify, the things
Right.
that will actually make them happy. I was smiling before. The reason why I was smiling was because you mentioned there 75K is what makes people kind of, I guess, comfortable and happy,
No, they
and
don't get happier if they make more. It's not
they
that
don't
that
make
number
happy.
makes them happy,
Yeah,
right? But they won't be happier if they're making double that.
yeah, yeah.
That's not what
Um,
the money is not bringing the happiness is the point.
yes, yes. Although I also feel that I know for a lot of my friends, maybe it's a age thing also. It's also what's important is how much the others are making also, which factors in a lot in today's society. It's like, okay, I have a good friend who, whatever number he targets is
Right.
doesn't make him happy because he compares it to what someone else is making, and so there's always a gap. And it's
Right.
just it's interesting how the mind works in that. Um, Avi, if someone is listening today, is afraid that their job might vanish to AI, what would you say to them about preparing for the future?
Well, the first thing is I hope they're already, studying and learning how to use the different tools that are available for whatever work they're doing, whether it's just straight ChatGPT or other tools that are available. Two is to not be afraid of it because it really is very simple to use. If someone can send an email, someone can use AI, and you spend an hour or three on YouTube and watch the videos, or just ask the AI, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or whatever tool they're using. How do I do this? And I've actually sometimes posed Claude and ChatGPT against each other, and they'll recommend the other one for the other, depending on what the usage is. I would say that it's very prudent for people to get into the mindset of working what some people call fractional work, as opposed to it's like part-time work, basically. Nice term for part-time work, but fractional work, which doesn't necessarily mean that people are working in a freelance gig kind of setup, but be prepared to work for several companies as opposed to just one, right? So you're not the corporate job of, 20, 30, 40-year long career is long gone. And people, even today, right, people are not talking in terms of having a job for 5, 10 years, right? So just to create the redundancy, the safety net of working a few jobs in a few different, even different industries, or if it's within the same industry. And companies are very happy to hire that way as well. They're not necessarily looking for full-time people. But if someone can go in and work that part-time gig, and that is building for themselves a safety net.
Mm. So be flexible, get prepared, to try the softwares, see, maybe there's other opportunities in other companies to work there too. And with AI, hopefully, that doesn't mean working two full-time jobs. It's just two jobs that are kind of part-times, because also with AI, you could do a lot in a small amount of period of time with the right tools.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And what would you say that mindset is, or habit is, that allows you to think like that?
Of
Trying to be flexible, trying to leverage this, the technology, the tools, and to, I guess, always find what is the solution here.
I guess the best way I would frame it is something that I learned when I was a counselor at summer camp a whole bunch of years ago. And we as staff were, basically trained to be flexible and adaptable, right? And that is really what is going to give people the resilience for that rough spot of the next probably few years before we get into the settled stage of when, hopefully, after the storm and things are figured out governmentally, societally, work wise, AI wise, human purpose wise. That's what's really needed right now in the short term, right? Unless if you have listeners that are the genius, right, in a certain field. For example, we go to radiology. So 90% of radiology today is done by AI and image recognition. And they don't need the general practitioner radiologist anywhere in the world. It used to be 20 years ago or so that the doctors in England or in the United States were sending their x-rays over to India because it was lower cost labor. And the Indian radiologist was doing the analysis of the imagery. Right. Today, it's all AI. And if someone is, that expert that can understand the outlying situations where you need, the expert that can identify the one thing that was different in this one image, then that's great. But for the rest of us, right, the resilience that will be built upon, again, that flexibility and adaptability and risk management, basically. Because companies are going to hire, and companies really don't even know how long they're going to be able to hire for. Right? They might hire someone in that has, some of that AI or a lot of that AI experience, in whatever field, whether it's accountancy or whether it's marketing or inventory management or whatever task it is. If people have to have the AI, right? They have to be able to use ChatGPT and professionally and efficiently. That for sure. It's not that difficult to do. If people are avoiding that, then don't bother. But even with that, again, create that redundancy across a number of jobs, 2, 3 jobs, because one, it'll give cross experience, right? That's actually for the first thing. First thing is really that risk management of saying, okay, this company, they're hiring, I'm going to do the job, but they don't even know if and how long they're going to be able to do, one, compete against other companies, and two, how long the position that they're hiring for is really necessary.
Yeah. Interesting. No, that's very helpful. Avi, this has been very interesting. If people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Sure. Just go to my website. If you can put it in the podcast notes, it's Avi
Yep.
Mederer, AVIMAD, M like mother, ADERER.com. And there's a contact page there.
Awesome. And is there anything you feel like we should touch on?
The one thing I would say is we touched on a lot, and I think probably the most critical part of it, I think in the short term, was that idea of the redundancy and working a number of jobs and positions and not to be afraid of getting into the AI. But for individuals, young adults, especially parents of young children, literacy is really so important. There are already studies, there's an MIT study done that showed that people that are using ChatGPT as opposed to just doing the research or task at hand on their own already have a 20% less neural pathway construction in their brains by using GPT as opposed to doing it directly. So people that are
That's
using AI have less brain development, and that's adults, right? So
Is that
children,
because they're not doing the kind of critical thinking?
yes, yes, it's exactly because the brain, and it's specifically to reading. And when I talk about literacy, I'm talking about the physical activity, and it really the turning point is around fourth grade, right? So lower than fourth grade is the time to get them into it, and then at fourth grade and on, the activity of reading, not video, not on-screen reading is okay apparently from what studies are saying, but not even audio, right? But the actual physical activity of reading is critically important in this AI world, right? We used to talk about how important and nice literacy is across the world, but now it's really critical, one. And two is getting into that experience problem of, the new people coming in and not gaining the actual, hands-on experience through life. And that's going to be less and less available because of AI. So reading of history of the content specifically that we're reading about, right, are those things that are going to really augment that and be really critical coming in the next 10, 20 years. So parents of young children are informed.
Yeah. It
Please
is
put
it
the
is
word out.
yeah, it is worrying because we I feel like this is going to lead to us losing that ability to have that critical thinking because you don't need to think about a lot of things. You just type it in and it gives you the answer. You don't have to think about it that much. You don't connect it to other ideas and try to explore it that much. It's just, especially, when you align that also with the school system of just memorizing things. It
Right.
just,
And you don't need the knowledge download anymore. Right.
yeah,
And that's all schools is giving over knowledge. And today, one of the great things that started some 20 years ago is something called, for example, the reverse classroom, where the teacher wasn't giving over information. The students are given projects to work on,
mm,
and they have to do the research, right? And then they have to report back to, in essence, the teacher who is acting as a coach as opposed to
yeah,
a teacher and just disseminating information, right? So
yeah.
it's really, really important is the literacy aspect of it.
100%. And it goes back to that point of getting that experience yourself is very different than
Yes,
just reading it.
yes,
you just, the neurons are going to be different.
right. And then also just societally, we know that the last, whatever it's been, 15 years or so of smartphones, people are disconnected. People don't have that social capacity that we used to have to connect. So when we talk about literacy and reading, I'm guilty of this myself because I don't really enjoy reading novels and things like that, right? But novels can give us empathy, can give us an understanding of the other side of a story, of other humans that are involved and interactions socially. And those can really, really help and augment the situation socially as well. In addition
Yeah.
to, of course, the brain development aspect of reading itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, apparently the future, the only thing we're going to be able to do is human connection. So we're going to have time for that.
There will be time, and we have to maybe relearn that in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
But
100%. Avi, it's been a pleasure speaking
okay.
to you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Hadi. It's
Perfect.
been a pleasure.
Have a good day.
Appreciate it.